Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakahakodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who ruled and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and in this video, I'll be profiling an article from ZeroHedge.com titled, Russia Enacts Lengthy Prison Sentences for Wartime Desertion and Refusal to Serve. Days after announcing a partial mobilization of national forces amid the ongoing special operation in neighboring Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin on Saturday enacted significant measures to prevent citizens from fleeing draft notices as he signed into law stiff penalties for desertion. Putin specifically introduced mobilization, martial law, and wartime measures into the Russian criminal code for the first time, which also covers long prison terms for voluntary surrender. And this is 2 Esdras chapter 15, verse 17, taking place over in Russia as we speak. 2 Esdras chapter 15 in the Apocrypha, verse 17, a man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. What does that sound like? A state of martial law where people's movements in the places they live are heavily restricted. In this case, over in Russia right now, you've got a lot of men trying to flee Putin's draft notice, that partial mobilization of 300,000 reservists, but laws are being put on the book to keep those men from fleeing. Hey, a man trying to leave one city to go into another city, so to speak, and not being able to, them facing lengthy prison sentences for trying to flee that draft. And then also, as we'll see later on in this article, some countries neighboring Russia are not allowing Russian draft dodgers to be able to flee from the country and find sanctuary in their country. And best believe that things like this are going to come to the United States of America as well. Drafts, a state of martial law, and penalties for trying to avoid the draft, because World War III will take place, and it's a part of biblical prophecy. This is Revelation chapter 9, verse 12. One woe or destruction is past, referring to World War I, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. World War II, which is past, and World War III, which is quickly coming. And while you've got the war in Ukraine taking place, and rumors of war, such as China going to war against Taiwan, ultimately World War III will take place in the Middle Eastern region, in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, which you can further read about in Joel chapter 3. And as it says in Joel chapter 2, verse 20, I will remove far off from you the Northern Army, that North American Army, the United States military, all branches into that Middle Eastern region for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And U.S. citizens will be drafted to go fight in that war, just like you've got Russian citizens getting drafted right now to go fight in Ukraine. But let's get back into this article to see how a man shall desire to go into a city but not be able to. It comes following days of social media videos out of Russia going viral, which shows young men pack out airports, as well as long queues at border posts at places like the Russia-Georgia border. According to the Moscow Post, some of the penalties include a harsh 15 years in prison. Under the law, voluntary surrender is punishable by up to 15 years in prison, but a first-time offender may be exempted from criminal liability if he took measures for his release, returned his unit or place of service, and did not commit other crimes while in captivity, according to the bill published on the State Duma website. Desertion during a period of mobilization or wartime will be punishable by up to 10 years in jail, while conscientious objectors will risk up to 3 years in prison. Penalties are also stipulated for looting during wartime, after the opening months of the Ukraine invasion saw criticism from the West over reports of Russian troops rummaging through stores and residences of occupied areas. From the Real Fly's Twitter page, Russian mobilization is underway. Last week, Putin's order called up some 300,000 reservists, with some reports speculating that the actual figure could be much higher, as much as 1 million, according to some sources, though this remains unconfirmed. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has meanwhile been encouraging safe passage and protection for Russian soldiers who surrender, according to his words summarized in The Hill. Appealing directly to Russians during an address, Zelensky said Ukraine could guarantee 3 terms to Russian soldiers in exchange for their surrender. He said such Russians will be treated in a civilized manner. The circumstances of their surrender will remain undisclosed, and Ukraine will find a way to ensure those who do not want to return to Russia are not exchanged. Zelensky asserted in making the appeal, Russian commanders do not care about the lives of Russians. They just need to replenish the empty spaces left by the dead, wounded, those who fled, or the Russian soldiers that were captured. There are fresh reports Sunday saying that Russian President Putin in the coming days will impose a travel ban outside the country for all military-age males. A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. From Visegrad 24's Twitter page, chaos at the Sheremetyevo airport in Moscow today as Russian men try to flee the country before Putin closes the borders. Slovakia, whatever that is. Russian males trying to flee Russia to go into another place to escape that partial mobilization. But with these new laws being put on the books, they're going to be restricted from doing so and face prison sentences for trying to dodge the draft. Countries like Finland and the Baltic states have taken measures to essentially lock down their borders to Russian young men suspected of fleeing military service. Again, a man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able. The Baltic countries have already enacted a de facto blanket travel ban on Russian nationals, while Finland has thus far taken only temporary measures to restrict the flow of Russian travelers. And so, as we can see, biblical prophecy continues to take place right before our very eyes. And like I said earlier in the video, a draft will come to the United States of America as well, and similar measures like this for those who try to avoid the draft. But now, I'm going to play a clip from the brother GMS Watchman's YouTube channel titled World War III, that third woe. Russian women say final goodbyes to husbands as Putin orders draft to fight in Ukraine. And hey, it is going to be a final goodbye for a lot of those Russian women, for their husbands, their sons, brothers, boyfriends, etc., because a lot of them are going to die when they go over to fight Ukraine, just like a lot of you U.S. citizens are going to die when you're drafted to go fight in World War III, the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and the women over here are going to mourn as well. This is 2 Esdras chapter 16, verses 33 to 34. The virgins shall mourn, having no bridegrooms. The women shall mourn, having no husbands. Their daughters shall mourn, having no helpers. In the wars, the war in Ukraine, World War III, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, shall their bridegrooms be destroyed, and their husbands shall perish of famine. The virgins shall mourn, the bridegrooms for having no bridegrooms, and the women shall mourn, having no husbands, because in the wars shall their bridegrooms be destroyed. Russian women say final goodbyes, being in a state of mourning, to husbands as Putin orders draft to fight in Ukraine.
In Russia, President Putin's order to call up another 300,000 soldiers is being met with widespread protests. Reports have circulated on social media of people with no military experience being drafted, along with others who are too old or people with disabilities. This report by a Russia editor.
And real quick, this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I don't own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes.
Steve Rosenberg includes some distressing images.
At a military draft office near Moscow, the roll call begins. More Russians mobilized and on their way to fight in Ukraine. And left behind their loved ones. For many here, this war has suddenly become very real. But at this recruitment center, the Russians we spoke to said they supported the draft. I'm in the mood to fight, says Dmitry, an HR manager. Since we've been drafted, we have to serve. This mother says the lads will run about a bit there. They'll lose a bit of weight. It'll be fine. Not everyone is so positive. In Siberia, a recruitment officer was shot and seriously wounded. The gunman reportedly incensed that his friend had been called up to fight. Across Russia, there's been a spate of attacks on enlistment officers. More than a dozen have been set on fire since Vladimir Putin announced the call-up. And this is the Russian Republic of Dagestan. Protests against mobilization. A sign of the anger in Russia's poorer regions, populated by ethnic minority groups, where many feel they are being called up at a disproportionate rate. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin was shown meeting the leader of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, and demanding that the West respect Russia. Not a word about the protests. When the Kremlin says, your country needs you, some Russians are happy to answer President Putin's call. But clearly, many are not. And in some parts of the country, mobilization is sparking social unrest and undermining trust in the authorities. Look at the queues leaving Russia. This is the land border with Georgia. Many Russian men of military age are trying to get out.
But as we read in that previous article, for how much longer will they be able to do so? A man shall desire to go into a city or another country and shall not be able. And look at the look on these women's faces. The brother put that precept right here. Again, the virgin shall mourn, having no bridegrooms. The women shall mourn, having no husbands. In the wars shall their bridegrooms be destroyed.
But for their sons and husbands, a very different journey starts here.
If you see something, say something.
So again, as we can clearly see, biblical prophecy is taking place right before our very eyes. So with this video, I hope your sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity, the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.